And we are back here on WLTH 1370 AM. This is Issues and Answers. My Country with Scott Cannon here. And I remember at the beginning of this this conflict that was started last year, I believe it was in late February. Yeah, I believe it was February 2022. Everybody came out, everybody and their mother came out and said, you know, this is solely about Vladimir Putin wanting to restore the Russian Empire. This has nothing to do with NATO. That's all they said. This has nothing to do with NATO. And I came on here and I talked about George Kennan, who was the ambassador to the Soviet Union at the time, back in the 80s, I believe in the 70s and 80s. And he said, look, the worst thing we can do is continue to expand NATO. This is the worst thing we can do, because Russia has been invaded multiple times in its existence, always from the West. Why? 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 Do you want to test the biggest nuclear power on the planet by encircling them after vowing that you would not do that? Why do you think they're gonna let you put weapons on their border? Do you think that the United States would let Russia put weapons in Canada on the Canadian border? Do you think that the United States would let Russia put weapons in Mexico on the Mexican border? And even worse, armed drug cartels. Because that's basically what we're doing with the Azov Battalion and all these, you know, these neo-Nazi groups that were arming in Ukraine. We're essentially giving their version of the Mexican drug cartels weapons. So the whole time you get Vladimir Putin just wants to restore the empire. That's it. You never got anything about NATO and how the United States, which was begged by many people, not just George Kennan, our ambassador, but also even people like Pat Buchanan. Not that I'm a huge fan of his. There were dozens of ambassadors and diplomats and scholars who got together to write Bill Clinton back in the 90s and beg him to not expand NATO because we were poking the bear. And I even played this clip from Joe Biden, our president, our current president, who said that the only thing he could see causing a conflict between us and Russia is expanding NATO. He said this.
I think the one place where the greatest consternation would be caused in the short term for admission, having nothing to do with the merit and preparedness of the country to come in, would be to admit the Baltic states now in terms of NATO-Russian, U.S.-Russian relations.
So he knew that the relationship between us and Russia was going to be affected the more NATO countries we invited, the more countries we invited into NATO. He's known this obviously since 1997, even though he continues to pretend that he did not know this now. Well, anyway, folks, now we have the actual NATO, the head of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, admit that before this war even started, Vladimir Putin tried everything in his power to avoid this and just asked them to please stop trying to encircle my country. Just stop. And this wouldn't even happen.
The background was that President Putin declared in the autumn of 2021, and he actually sent a draft treaty that he wanted NATO to sign to promise no more NATO enlargement. That was what he sent us. And that was a precondition for not invade Ukraine. Of course, we didn't sign that.
Of course you did.
The opposite happened. He wanted us to sign a promise never to enlarge NATO. He wanted us to remove our military infrastructure in all allies that have joined NATO since 1997, meaning half of NATO, all the Central and Eastern Europe. We should remove NATO from that part of our alliance, introducing some kind of E and B or second-class membership. We rejected that. So he went to war to prevent NATO, more NATO close to his borders. He has got the exact opposite.
So that's the head of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, admitting specifically that in 2021, Vladimir Putin goes to him and says, you know, you guys keep trying to encircle us here. You guys keep encircling us here. Can you please just stop? Can you please stop? Like, we've been invaded multiple times. We don't want to invade Ukraine. But we will if you guys keep threatening the security of our country. Now, according to the government, our government, and the New York Times, they're all saying it was unprovoked. They keep using the term unprovoked. Even now, you turn on MSNBC, you turn on CNN, you turn on Fox, you turn on anywhere, they say it was unprovoked. You know, it was unprovoked. But why does Russia oppose NATO enlargement? Because they don't appreciate them putting missiles in Poland and Romania after the United States abandoned the ABM treaty, the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty. Let's not also forget, right, that the United States has engaged in over 70 regime changes. They have helped to overthrow 70 regimes during the Cold War. During the Cold War was between 1947 and 1989. That's only 42 years, 70 regime changes. And even since then, they've overthrown governments in Serbia, Afghanistan, Georgia, Iraq, Libya, Venezuela, Syria, and of course Ukraine in 2014. You also have the fact that a lot of American politicians openly say we want to destroy Russia. Like in the intro I just played, that was Republicans for Ukraine. That was a commercial for the Republicans from the Ukraine that I played after coming in from the break. These people literally think that it is solely their job to destroy another nation that they don't like. They are advocating to destroy Russia. And they are saying it's all about decolonizing Russia. Imagine if Russia said, we're going to decolonize the United States. We're going to give it back to the Native Americans. Or we're going to take Texas or Puerto Rico or Hawaii or some of our territories, you know. Imagine if Russia did that, how the United States would react. Even Vladimir Zelensky, he knew that NATO enlargement would bring about a war with Russia. His former advisor, Alexei Arestovich, declared that there was a 99.9% probability that the price of Ukraine joining NATO would be a big war with Russia. Now, mind you, for many years since the Cold War, Russia has not invaded Finland or Austria or even threatened these countries for years. And from the time that Ukraine became independent in 1991 with the fall of the Soviet Union until 2014, when our government helped overthrow their government, Ukraine's government, they didn't say anything about Ukraine for 23 years. It was only when we overthrew the Ukrainian government in 2014, the Maidan coup, and we put an anti-Russian, pro-NATO regime in office, and that's when Russia took Crimea. Because they thought that their Black Sea naval base that is in Crimea would fall to NATO. Even then, Russia didn't say, look, we're going to take all of Ukraine, in spite of the fact that the United States and NATO were overthrowing their government and trying to put a anti-Russian government in place. They just said, look, just live up to the Minsk Accord. That's it. That's it. Just live up to the Minsk Accord, which said, look, in the Donbass region, which is mostly Russian, it is mostly ethnically Russian, just let it maintain its autonomy, and we'll leave you alone. Did NATO and the United States do that? No. They actually armed and trained a Ukrainian army to make the NATO enlargement more likely. As you hear in the video, just 2 years ago, in the summertime, Putin made one last attempt to delay the inevitable, writing Jens Stoltenberg and NATO saying, please stop doing what you're doing, because I'm about to ruin the image and the style that you're used to. Okay? Seriously. At this point, NATO, Joe Biden, flatly rejected negotiations with Putin and Russia. And they said that NATO enlargement was none of Russia's business. Imagine the world's preeminent nuclear power, it not being any of their business that they are being surrounded by a hostile military alliance. And as I talk about on this show regularly, this has had great consequences for us here in this country. Great consequences. We see countries all over Africa, all over Latin America, the Middle East, Asia. These countries are dumping the United States dollar. They are de-dollarizing because they see the sanctions that have been put on Russia by the United States after being antagonized into a fight with NATO and the United States. And so all these countries all over the world are saying, hey, if this is how you're going to use your dollar, we don't want to use your dollar anymore. Which is going to lead to massive inflation here in this country. The next 20 years or so are going to be very hard for us in this country, and it is solely because the recklessness of our government here in this country. But So what do you guys think? Please give me a call, 219-885-1371. When we get back, happy.